Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're heading to Peru to explore the magic of the sacred valley and the wisdom of the Andean cosmology rooted in the land. Our guest is Terry Cumes, director of the world-renowned retreat center Willka T'ika, nestled in the sacred valley. Willka T'ika blends luxury and wellness with the powerful energy and rich cultural traditions of Peru. Raised in the U.S., yet deeply connected to Peru through his family, Terry offers a rare perspective, bridging modern Western life with ancient Andean tradition. The Sacred Valley is high on my own list of places to experience, and I'm fascinated by its culture, history, and spiritual depth. Terry has an incredible personal journey that led him to Peru, and today he's here to share his story and to give us a glimpse into the extraordinary energy that awaits in the Sacred Valley. Terry, welcome to the Campfire.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning. Great to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited for this conversation. You and I got a chance to talk, I guess a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. You turned me on to an awesome book that gave me a little bit of a heads up on our listeners here. I am so intrigued, but also curiosity, intrigue, excitement, all of these things for this conversation. And I want to bring listeners in on it. So I wonder if we could just start right from the beginning, if you could share a little bit about what Willka T'ika is.
Sure. Well, Willka T'ika in Quechua, which is the language spoken by about 10 million people in the Andes, means sacred flower. And when you come here, you'll see why, because there are many beautiful gardens, and it's a beautiful design space that my mother created 30 years ago. But what we are is a luxury wellness center in the middle of the Andes that focuses on Andean cosmology. So we focus on yoga and mindfulness, but also the wisdom of the Andes as taught by the Quechua people, who are the direct descendants of the Incas.
That's a rich initial introduction. I love it. That's not your first time you've had to explain that before.
Well, I think you said it better than I did, though. We do a lot of different things here, but we have to differentiate ourselves, because when we were here 30 years ago, there was no one else. We were the only ones doing yoga. We were the only ones doing these kinds of programs. But over the last 10 years, there's been a huge influx of wellness centers, plant medicine centers, meditation, yoga, everything. So we've had to sort of focus on the fact that we were here originally because we wanted to teach people about the Quechua people and their culture and their spirituality. And that's what I think makes us unique from a lot of other organizations. Plus, we're pretty high end too. So
yes. Well, so there's a lot that you just said in that brief explanation that I want to kind of go into a lot of those topics, Andean cosmology being one of those that we'll get to. But just to sort of help people paint a picture, if I were to arrive at Willka T'ika, what do I find?
Yeah, so you would fly into the airport of Cusco, which is in the Andes. It was the capital city of the Incan Empire. So if you go back 500 years, when there were millions of Incans all the way from Colombia down to Argentina, the middle of the empire, which Cusco in Quechua actually means navel. So the navel of the Incan Empire was here in the Andes. And so that is the second largest city in Peru, and it's the largest city in the Andes. So you would fly into there. You would feel the altitude immediately, because you'd be landing at about 11,400 feet. Which for most of us living in the States, we've not been that high unless we were skiing at a very, very high resort. So you will feel the altitude, and then you drive down into what's called the Sacred Valley. And the Sacred Valley is about 40 kilometers of beautiful, what was mostly farmland where the Incans grew their crops, and now is a collection of towns, ruins, markets, all ancient Incan sites, which is why it's called the Sacred Valley. And that stretch of land is considered the most sacred and most beautiful part of the Andes. And it culminates with Machu Picchu, which is, as you probably know, a World Heritage Site. And the reason why most people come to Peru is to see Machu Picchu. So when you go to Peru, you will most likely fly into Cusco, drive past our property on the way through the Sacred Valley, and then head to Machu Picchu on train. That is the typical sort of 1 week tour that the average traveler will do.
And the Willka T'ika facility, what will I find there?
you will find a fairly large facility. We have 35 guest rooms, 2 yoga spaces, a bunch of ceremony spaces, and 7 chakra gardens. And because we're a yoga center and my mother was a gardener, she designed 7 gardens. Each garden represents one of the energy centers in the yogic teaching, which are called chakras. And so the 7 gardens each have their own color, their own types of flowers, their own symbols, their own meditations, their own sound. And so we walk people through the 7 chakra gardens, and then they do their yoga, their meditation. They eat organic farm-to-table food. And then every day we take them on different excursions to see sacred sites, which are often Incan ruins, but they could be beautiful hikes in the Andes. I personally, like yourself, I love hiking. So for me, one of the most exciting things about being here is getting out and seeing the mountains. And there's some beautiful hikes, which I know you're going to do when you come down here. So
yes,
that too, you like.
Yeah, so excited. So you mentioned that Cusco is 11,400 feet. What is the elevation where you are?
Yeah, we're at 9,400, so 2,000 feet lower, which makes a big difference. It's a difference between getting a really bad headache and just having a little headache. And so most of our guests arrive here and feel pretty good. There'll be, a little bit of altitude adjustment, usually goes away in a couple of days, but Cusco can be a little intense for the first 2 days. So we like to encourage people to come here first, acclimate for a few days, then go to Cusco and then go do their mountaineering afterwards when they've had a week.
Makes a lot of sense. And they probably feel some relief when they get to you because they started out feeling bad and maybe felt a little better by the time they get to you.
Yeah, we used to have all our groups start in Cusco because it's such a beautiful city. And then they would get here and feel this big relief. But now, just because our clients are probably getting a little older, we have them come here first, and then we get less adjustment issues.
Yeah. So I'm not sure which order to ask these next 2 questions. So I'm gonna ask you both of them at the same time and then let you kind of decide. But it's really like I want to understand the history of how Willka T'ika got started. I know that it's a creation that your mother began, but the connected question is, what is it about Peru and the Sacred Valley? You just gave a very beautiful description of it, but there's this energy there, and I'm just curious, like what the draw is to Peru and to the Sacred Valley. What brought your mother there, and how did Willka T'ika get started?
Yeah, I'll speak of her first and then myself. She came here in the 80s on a mystical tour. At that point, there were very few Americans going to Peru. There was still terrorism in Peru. There was a group called the Sendero Luminoso, or Shining Path. And so Americans were discouraged from coming, which was a shame because it was always a beautiful country. And so some more adventurous travelers like my parents came here in the 80s and took tours and learned about Quechua culture and cosmology and spirituality, were very intrigued by it, started bringing their own groups down. And then eventually my mother in 1994 decided to buy some land. I was actually with her that year. I was doing a trek to El Sangati, which is one of the 2 sacred glaciers here. And we stopped by the property to see what it looked like. And it was a bunch of rocks nestled between a road and a river. And I thought she was crazy. But she had vision, which you can see now when you come visit us. But it took many years to create the paradise that she's created. And many other people now have come down. But what she did in the 1990s was really build the first sanctuary, a wellness sanctuary and yoga center in Peru. And then we started bringing yoga groups as early as 1995. I think I brought our first international group here in the late 1990s. And then I started bringing groups year after year. I was practicing yoga in San Francisco at the time in the 90s. And I had actually learned yoga with my parents in Santa Barbara by a famous yoga teacher named Patabi Joyce, who's the founder of Ashtanga Yoga. So we were always into yoga. And it was logical for my mother to build a yoga room. And then people would come down and learn about Peru, and she would take them to the jungle and the Amazon, and I would lead a bunch of retreats too. I, of course, went on to do other things, went to college, went to grad school, lived abroad, worked in hospitality and education. So for me, it was always an idea that I might come back and run the center. I went to business school and then thought this would be a wonderful business to run, a lot of fun, especially after doing all the corporate things and working in startups and having the whole Bay Area experience. I thought, well, this would be a lot more fun. And then my wife had a health crisis around 2014. And so it was pretty clear after that neither one of us wanted to go back into the rat race. She was a venture capitalist and I was an executive at an education firm. And so we came down here thinking we would just help out my mom for a while. And then we kept coming back. And then around 2018, she said, I need to retire. She was 70 at the time. And we took over. And so we've been here for 7 years now, since 2018, and decided that we really like it. We went through the whole pandemic, which is a whole nother story, and decided that that was actually a really fun thing to be doing was to be here in the Sacred Valley during the pandemic. We survived. We were the only hotel that stayed open and kept our whole staff of 22 people employed.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then the business turned around after the pandemic. It took a while, but we've had a lot of fun the last couple of years. We've been very busy, and so we're staying here for at least the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, you have such a diverse background, and especially like your time in the Bay Area and going to business school. Kind of sticking with your story, what when you went to business school and when you were kind of living that life in the Bay Area, like, were you intentionally working towards landing where you are now, or like, did things unfold differently?
I love that you use the word intention, because when we run our wellness retreats here, we always try to have people think about their intention. And what an intention is it's a rough indication of where you're feeling pulled towards. It's not necessarily a definitive plan, and it's certainly something that changes. So I would say, yes, there was always an intention. But when you go to business school, you're spending a lot of money, and you want to try the things, and you want to do different things, and you want to try the startup world and try the executive world and the corporate world. So I felt like I needed to do all those things. And, whether or not I came back to Peru is, I guess, partly chance and partly destiny. But I went off and did a bunch of things for many years, including running a large hospitality business, which gave me a lot of experience for what I'm doing now. So, yeah, there was always in the back of my mind this idea. And I think I remember telling my mom at one point, please don't sell the business until you check with the I would like the first right of refusal.
Nice.
And, she sort of agreed with that at the time. So it worked out well. It was a windy road to get here, but it all worked out in a beautiful way.
Yeah. And it sounds like you guys had some life experiences that kind of helped make the decision easier for you to head to Peru.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, because sometimes life is what has to push you in the direction you need to go in. It's not always easy when you're in a job and you're doing well and you like it to just get up and leave. And I think there was a combination of circumstances where I was getting to the 2.5-year mark of a job and wasn't sure I felt about it. Had a meeting with my boss. I called my mother. She said, I want to retire. And I said, would you want me to take over? And she said, oh my God, I was hoping you would ask me that, because I was too proud to ask you. And when I asked her, she was so relieved, and I actually believed her. Of course, it's always hard for people to let go of their babies. And so it's been a 7-year process of having her, really retire. And now she is officially retired, and she's enjoying her retirement. And she's still here with us in Peru. She gives the garden tours to people. But I do, I run the business, and I have a wonderful team of 22 people here that support me, including my wife, Tristan.
Yeah. And one thing I did want to touch on, because you mentioned like in the 70s when your mom first visited, there was some unrest there. And I'm just curious how that's kind of evolved and how people are dealing with it now.
Yeah. So it was the 80s. And the 80s was a tough time for Peru. They had Sendero Luminoso, as I mentioned, the Shining Path. It was a Maoist group linked to the narco trade. And there were certain mountain cities where you couldn't go. The Inca Trail I did in 1990, which is before Sendero Luminoso had been eradicated. So I did not feel unsafe in Peru at all. And that's typical of the State Department warnings. You'll get warnings all over the world that say, don't go there. I'm sure you know this very well from all your travels. You go there and you don't understand what they're talking about.
Right. We
were in the jungle last week and we brought some friends with us, and they took malaria pills. And I said, why are you taking malaria pills? They said, well, the CDC website and the State Department said and my doctor said I should take malaria. And I said, I've been coming to the jungle for 30 years. I've never taken malaria pills in Peru. I have in many other countries, but not here. And the first thing the guide in the jungle did was tell everybody, if you're taking malaria pills, please stop taking them. There's no malaria here. But, this is the CDC. And then there are parts of Peru where malaria does exist, but the tourism parts are not. So that's the same as the political warnings. There are parts, in very remote parts of the jungle where you wouldn't go today. There is still narco traffic in the deep jungle. And you might even see it. I went on a long adventure a few weeks ago where I was driving my 4-wheel drive for 3 days, and people were telling me, oh, this is the place you don't want to drive at night. But I didn't feel unsafe at all. Back in the 90s, I still felt that way, but there were certainly places you didn't go. And so the Inca Trail was which is a famous 4-day trek that goes to Machu Picchu, which now is very, very crowded. But back then, there was no one on it. And I did that trail with my father in 1990. We carried our own stuff. We made fires on the trail. We camped out. There was no one there. It was beautiful. And now, you've got to book a year in advance. You've got to bring a team of porters. So things have changed a lot. But the good news is the tourism infrastructure is well developed and it's very safe. And the government cares deeply about protecting tourism. And so even when there's a strike or a protest, which we've had several of, it's been very safe. And I don't think any tourists have felt unsafe here.
That's great. Yeah, and that's really good to hear. So I want to come back to just the region in general, Peru, the Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu, and why people come there is, my feeling is there's sort of like this energy that pulls people there. I think most people know that region for Machu Picchu, and maybe a lot of people go for Machu Picchu and then discover everything else that's there. I haven't been, so I can't speak from experience. I'd love to hear from you. Like, what is it that calls people to the region?
Yeah, and I'm excited to ask you this question once you've been here, because when I remember landing in Cusco the first time, 1990, I remember getting off the plane and breathing in and going, wow, this place is special. And just looking at the mountains, and anyone who's been into the high mountains knows how majestical and powerful that can be. It's the same in the Rockies or the Himalayas or the Alps, but you walk into the Andes, you can feel, millions of years of majesty. And so you feel that when you land in Cusco, and then you go and you see these ancient ruins and these mystical sites, and you know that something happened that was very powerful, that's beyond our conception. And so Machu Picchu is one of these wonders of the world where no one knows exactly how it was built. No one knows how they moved these incredible rocks up, how they designed these beautiful fortresses and citadels and temples. And they're all over the Sacred Valley. So even outside my window where I'm sitting right now, I can point out to the mountains and I can see some Incan ruins that I can hike to in an hour. And so there aren't a lot of places in the world where you can just, be in a magical place like that in an hour of walking. And if you drive, you can get to in a couple hours, you can get to some really incredible places. So Machu Picchu is the crown jewel of the valley, and everyone wants to go there because it's a bucket list item for most people. But while you go there, you will see many other things along the way that will move you in different ways. And that's just the Andes. Then forget about the jungle and the coast and the desert and all the other things that Peru has.
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome. And actually, it's making me kind of jump around here a little bit on my questions, because I want to talk a little bit about your wellness retreats and what happens at Willka T'ika. Mm-hmm. But this conversation about the regions, just kind of a great lead in. So the book that your mom wrote is called Journey to Machu Picchu. And you suggested this to me, and I've been almost finished with it, and it's really, really intriguing. There's just a lot of mystery, and I'm excited to come to Peru and experience some of this for myself. But your mom talks a lot about Andean cosmology, and I know that's what you guys focus on there at Willka T'ika. And I would love if you could just kind of enlighten listeners a little bit about what this is, and maybe we just start with what is Andean cosmology?
Yeah, so my mother's name is Terry Cumes, same last name as myself. And her first book, because she's written several, her first book was called Pachamama's Children, Mother Earth and Her Children of the Andes in Peru. And I think that's a better title. Of course, the publishers did a second printing and wanted it to be more catchy, so they changed it to Journey to Machu Picchu, because most readers know what Machu Picchu is. They don't know what Pachamama is. But Pachamama means Mother Earth. And the Quechua people, who are the people living here today, again, the descendants of the Incans, are practicing many of the same belief systems that the Incans practice. What that means is they pray to Mother Earth, they pray to the mountains and the rivers and the lakes. And so their cosmology or their religion or their way of viewing the world or the universe is very much connected to nature. And I was just telling, we have 3 interns here from Stanford Business School, and I was just telling them about what makes our program so much more, I think, approachable to the average traveler, is that if you go to India, and I've been to India many times and I love it, I'm a yogi, I might have to do a prayer in Sanskrit. And I might feel really weird bowing down to some idol or some, statue of Parvati or Krishna and saying some words in a different language. And that might not feel comfortable for me. But if I come to Peru and I see one of our Kero or one of our Quechua healers doing a ritual to Pachamama, all they're doing is looking up and praying to the mountains and the rivers and the lakes. And that's something I think we could all relate to. Anyone who's been in nature, and I know a lot of your listeners care deeply about nature. You see a priest who's been, his whole life is dedicated to praying and protecting Mother Earth. It's very powerful, and especially makes you realize what we have to learn from them, because we are not doing such a good job, whether it's in Peru or the US or anywhere, of taking care of our planet. And so these people are stewards of the land, and they are doing rituals on a daily basis, which I can talk about, to respect and pray and pay homage to Pachamama, to the Apus. The Apus are the mountain gods, to the rivers and the lakes. And they're doing this in many different ways, which we teach here at Willka T'ika. And people, when they come to Peru, should learn about them, or at least experience them, because if you don't, you're missing out. It's sort of like going to the Vatican and not seeing not seeing a ceremony, or going to India and not going to a puja. I mean, there's a lot of rich tradition here, whether it's a cultural or spiritual perspective that you take. That's beautiful to see and powerful, and I think very inspiring.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I'm curious if we can just keep kind of staying here for a little bit. I'd love to learn a little bit more directly from you on some of the things. So you talked about some of the rituals. When you and I spoke the last time, you were kind of talking about the 3 different worlds. I'd love to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a couple things I can talk about briefly, and the 3 worlds is a really important one because they're all over the Incan Empire. And if you go to any ruin, including our gardens here, you will see representations of the 3 worlds. And in shamanic traditions, and I can explain what that means in a minute, but shamanic traditions often have 3 worlds. And so in the Western world, we have this world, and then we have heaven and hell, which is a kind of a really depressing way to look at the world sometimes. But shamanic traditions, it's an upper world, a middle world, and a lower world, and none of them are good or bad. They're all worlds where beings can circulate. And so they pray to the condor, who represents the upper world. The condor is flying up in the mountains. And when you see a condor fly in the Andes, it is one of the most beautiful things you can see. And you will immediately feel something, and you can see why people pray to the condor. I mean, imagine you're lying there, having a picnic, and this gigantic bird, 15-meter wingspan, flies over you. You're going to think there's something happening. Yeah. So people feel that upper world very powerfully, and that is the world of the mountains and the spirits and the condors. The middle world is all the creatures that live here on the earth. And those in Peru, it's the puma, because the puma is the power animal of the Andes. And if I look up into the mountain I was just looking at before, it's called Pumahuanca, which means the place of the puma. And so that is the animal that represents the living world. And then if you go to this underworld, that's the serpent. And sometimes people think, oh, this is like hell. No, it's actually a world where snakes and maybe plants and things go into the earth, and it can be a very beautiful place for healing, to be grounded with the earth. And again, Pachamama means Mother Earth. And so if you want to think of these as 3 worlds, there's Kai Pacha, the current world, the world that where humans are. There's Uhu Pacha, the underworld, or the world of the snake. And there's Hanak Pacha, the world of the condor, or the upper world. And so those are worlds that you will see visually represented in different Incan ruins. You will see condor temples at Machu Picchu. You will see condor statues and carvings, pumas. You'll see snakes. You'll see this all over the Sacred Valley, including in our gardens, where each of our gardens will have these different metaphors and representations. The other thing I wanted to mention was we have healers. Sometimes we call them Andean priests. Sometimes we call them shamans, but that's not really the right word for them. The word is a paco, and a paco is a Quechua word for someone who is trained in reading the coca leaves and working with the coca leaves. And so their sacred plant here is the coca leaf, which, as you know, is illegal in the US. And we actually hosted a conference in January about the coca leaf and why it shouldn't be illegal, because it's an incredibly medicinal and powerful plant that people have consumed for many generations, and it's very healthy. But they use it in ceremonies here to pray. So a really nice thing to do if you're walking up in the mountains here, and this is a great thing to know when you go on your hike, is just carry a little bag of coca with you. It's leaves that you chew on. It's a very, very mild stimulant. I would say milder than tobacco, milder than coffee. And you chew coca leaves to help you with the altitude. It helps you digest. It helps you with energy. It helps you with hunger. And if you're walking through the mountains and you see a local campesino or Quechua person, any person really, just open up your bag and say, coca. And they will very happily take some coca from you. They'll stick it in their mouth. They'll chew it. They'll say a little prayer. You might exchange words and you go on your way. And it's a beautiful ritual that anyone can do. When my wife and I got married, we got married in Australia, and my mother wanted us to do a coca leaf blessing. Now, you can't bring coca leaves into Australia, just like you can't. You'll get arrested.
Yeah.
Just like you can't bring them into the U.S. So we use eucalyptus leaves or laurel leaves. You can use 3 leaves and do a blessing anywhere you go. So these are the kinds of things that we would teach here. So if you wanted to go deeper than just the coca leaf reading, what we would do is have our Andean Paco, or our healer, come and do a whole offering to Mother Earth or to Pachamama. And this is called a pago a la tierra, or a payment to the earth. It's also called a despacho, which is a way of saying you're sending something, you're dispatching and offering to the gods, to Mother Earth. And this is something we do regularly here. In fact, this month is August of 2025. We have Pachamama. We have Pachamama month in August, which means every business, every family, every person who's deeply rooted in these traditions will actually do an offering. And so we brought our Paco from Caros, which is a 2-day journey from here, high mountain community, to come and do an offering for our staff. And so we do this whenever we have groups here. And he puts together not just cocoa leaves, but candies and grains and flowers and coins, everything that's of value to the Quechua people goes in this offering. We pray with it, we sing to it, we bury it in the garden, and that becomes a very important ritual for the people here. And my staff take it very seriously. When we do a Pago la Tierra, they won't work, they take the day off, we take it very seriously. And then we do this at least, whenever occasion comes up. And the crazy part about this ritual is you'll put a llama fetus in it. If it's a very special ritual, then you'll put a llama fetus in it, and that makes it extra powerful.
Wow. What is it like to participate? Well, actually, let me ask you, do you remember the first time you went through this ritual or you experienced it?
Gosh, it was a long time. I was probably in college, so I don't think I remember exactly. But we do it, almost every week here with our groups. Yeah. And so it's something all of our groups typically come for a week. And the first day they'll spend in our gardens, and we'll have the Paco, but Bill Benito is his name. He's a wonderful man. We've got pictures of him all over the place because he's so photogenic and he's got this amazing smile. We even built him a little house here. So when he comes to Willka T'ika, since it's a 2-day journey to get here, he can stay in his little house with his family, and he's very happy here. He's been part of our family for almost 30 years.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. So you mentioned the Apu, and did I say that right? The Apu?
Yes, there are many Apus. We have one here right outside my window called Pumahuanca. We have another one down the road called Chicon. These are all the mountains, the big important mountains. Often they're over 18,000 feet tall since we're in the Andes. The one that I think you're going trekking to one, aren't you?
Rainbow Mountain.
Okay, that might be an Apu. It's called Vinicunca would be the official word for Rainbow Mountain. Vinicunca, I'm sure, is an Apu. So I have a little book of all the Apus in Peru, and there are many dozens. But any really significant mountain is considered an Apu and is something to be revered and respected.
Yeah, and so please correct me. As I was reading this, I believe that the Apu represents kind of a spirit or a deity or, kind of a consciousness that is the mountain.
Yeah. So without getting too esoteric, it's really just about paying reverence to a sacred mountain, just the way any mountaineer would. If you were going to, go climb Everest, you would do, hopefully, I'm sure they do this in Nepal. I haven't climbed Everest, but I'm sure that they do an offering before they go up. In Kilimanjaro, I did climb that mountain. And I'm sure, we did the ritual before we went up. So it's about paying respect to a power much greater than yours. And this is partly for your own protection. If you're going to go hike up even towards an 18,000 foot glacier, you better make sure you prepared yourself. You're in a good state of mind. You've asked permission from the people and from the Apus to go in. So when we go hiking, we take the 3 cocoa leaves, which is called a quintu, and we do a little blessing and we ask for permission and protection. And I think it's really important before you go into any high mountain zone to be thoughtful and to be respectful.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you talked about the Himalayas and the Alps and other mountains. There is, and I know in the Himalayas, the local people there believe that the gods live at the mountain peaks. In fact, in Bhutan, it's against the law to summit mountains there because they believe that the deities live up there. And I think it's so interesting how these are different cultures that are so geographically far apart, but we all have this sort of same belief system about mountains in general. And I guess I just was curious to your thoughts on what it is about mountains that create that belief system.
Yeah, I love mountains. I always have. I grew up on the coast of Santa Barbara, California, but I've always been drawn to the mountains. And I think most people who live in the mountains feel that connection. And those who visit the mountains feel that connection, because there is a power, and it's very healing for people. When I have a very stressful time in my life and I don't really know what to do and I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, I will go for a walk in the mountains by myself for whether it's a few hours or a few days, and I always feel recharged. I mean, there is literally an energy that charges you up when you go into the mountains. And, I was saying Kilimanjaro is another culture where they believe that mountain was sacred. I think every culture believes that, because how could you not look at a majestic peak and not feel reverence? And it's the same thing with a condor. If you saw a condor, you believe it's a powerful animal. And if you saw a mountain, you would believe it was a majestic mountain.
Yeah, I mean, I completely resonate with that, and I understand that feeling, and I think that's what calls me to different mountains, and why I'm so excited to come to Peru and the Sacred Valley to to experience the uniqueness of the Andes and that mountain range. One of the things that's sort of just coming to me in this idea of Andean cosmology to sort of like dumb it down for myself here in the West. I mean, ultimately, it's really about gratitude and respect for nature.
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. And there's another word here that they use, which I think is really beautiful, which is aini. Aini means reciprocity. And I use it all the time because I think the literal translation in Quechua is today for me, tomorrow for you. Yeah. And what this means here is that when you're going into the mountains, you do an offering. You give the mountains something. It could just be cocoa leaves. They're simple people here. They don't have a lot, but what they put in that offering is everything that's of value to them. What I mentioned, the cocoa leaves, the flowers, the grains, the currency, the sweets. That's what they have of value. So they're being grateful for this bounty that the earth, that Pachamama has given them, because without it, they would have nothing. So they're thanking the water, they're thanking the farmland, they're thanking the rain, because that's what they survive off of. And the people still grow potatoes and corn and live off that. It's a very, very poor in an economic sense life, but a very rich in a spiritual sense life. And so the other thing I want to mention when I say aini is that chicha is the local corn beer that they make out of corn. And so when you're drinking chicha, you always pour a little bit to Pachamama first. Yeah. It's kind of like saying a prayer. So you're about to drink some chicha, and it's just customary here that people don't even know they're doing it half the time. They just give some to Pachamama. So that's an example of aini. You're exchanging energy. You're not just taking from Mother Earth, you're giving her something back. And it's very simple, but very powerful. And that's something I think we use a lot when we try to explain to people what they could learn from the locals here.
So you just nailed it. You just said, what can they learn? And I think specifically in the US and in the West, with all of the environmental concerns that are going on right now, like what can we learn from the tradition there in the Andes, in the Sacred Valley, that you would like for people to bring back to the US when they leave Willka T'ika?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think aini is probably the word. If I had to ask you to remember one word or one concept after your trip to Peru, I would hope that you would take that concept back. So when you go into nature, rather than taking from nature, what can you give nature? And that could just be you pick up some trash. So we do a hike on all of our wellness retreats, and my dog comes along with his backpack, and we all put trash in there. And sometimes the locals think we're crazy. Why are you picking up trash? But for us, it's a way of giving back to this hike that we do every week. And so that's a simple way to do it, giving a cocoa leaf blessing, helping the communities. We support a lot of different Quechua communities and schools. There's a lot of ways to give back, and it can be very simple. Picking up trash is, I think, one of the most simple things you can do. Being gracious with your hosts, being generous. It doesn't mean you can't bargain in the markets. You can and you should. But these are people that have very little, and sometimes if they sell you a woolen hat, that they're living off that money for weeks. And so, yes, you can bargain, but be generous with the people here and be gracious, and they are generous and gracious as well. And you will see that when you come here. So it applies to the people and it applies to nature equally.
Yeah, it's good to hear you say that. But there was something in your mom's book that resonated with me, because I now had traveled around to different, markets in lower income countries. And your mom made a comment about like the wage per hour that a weaver makes. And it was like, basically, she's like, if this wage had increased to like whatever minimum wage was in the United States, like a shirt would be like $2,000 or something like that. So it's just, it is so interesting to think about like the amount of work that goes into some of this stuff when we get into a situation where, as Westerners, we want to bargain for, a dollar better deal.
Yeah, I think of it as time. They don't value time the way we do. So they'll spend a month sewing a scarf, and then they'll sell it to you for $40. And you might be able to get it for $35. But when you think of they spend a month making the scarf, or is the $5. Now, if they asked you for $300, you should definitely be bargaining. If they ask you for $40 or $50, then if it's a good quality, and you have to be careful, of course, in Peru, like anywhere, you got to make sure you're getting the real alpaca, baby alpaca, not maybe alpaca, So, so there's a lot of fun to be had in the markets here.
Yeah, Terry, like I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I think what's so cool about you is your sort of Western upbringing in Bay Area of California, which is sort of like, a bubble of its own, right? And then you're able to bring that upbringing to Peru. And so you have this like really cool blend And I just wonder if you could talk, like, what's that like for you to bring together, that California upbringing with the way that you live today?
Well, I had a head start because my mother obviously was doing this stuff in the 80s. And so I was already a teenager then. And she was making me read these kinds of books and making me, listen to Deepak Chopra before he was well known. And I was doing yoga. So I had a head start. And then my father, who was a surgeon, he still is a surgeon. He was trained at Stanford and is a urologist. He was very dismissive of some of this at first because he had been a classically trained surgeon. But he was the one that actually went full on and became a shaman and went to Africa, where we're from originally. We were born in South Africa and became initiated as an African Sangoma. And so for the last 20 years or more, he's been practicing urology and shamanism together, which sounds crazy. And when he first did it, I think we were all worried that his patients were going to freak out. But what turns out to happen is that people really want both, and they really want to know the Western perspective, and they want to know the indigenous wisdom tradition. And if you can do both, I think you can be more helpful to people. And so it's wonderful to be Western trained and to have a great education and to have all these tools. But if you can supplement that with other traditions and different wisdoms and different intuitions, I think it's more powerful. And so for me personally, I've always tried to do that. And so right now we work with a shaman. Now I'm using the shaman in 3 different times. I've used it to talk about my dad from Africa, our Paco from the Andes, and now I'm going to talk about a shaman who works with us for plant medicine. He's Western trained as well. And some people say, well, I only want to work with indigenous people from the jungle. And I completely respect that. It's wonderful to work directly with indigenous people in the jungle, but can you communicate with them? And can you understand what they're telling you? And what happens if you have a problem and you need someone who can understand what you're going through? Having someone who can walk both worlds is really important. And so for me, with the business sense, I'm making business decisions every day that are from my business training. And I'm making decisions every day that are completely based on intuition and my respect for people. And I mentioned I have 3 business interns here right now, and they'll ask me a question like, well, why are you running this program if it's not profitable? And I'll say, well, I know in business school, they would have taught me not to do this. But what I've learned in 25 years of doing this is that actually there are better reasons to do things. And so I use both. Short answer, I use both, and I use both every day. And I think that's what makes my job fun. That's what makes me in some ways uniquely qualified to do it. But it also, most importantly, allows me to, I think, help more people. And so what we want to do is bring the people who have only had the Western perspective and haven't had yoga and haven't had all these other things to come here and help them open up to different types of modalities.
Yeah, you just hit a hot button for me. So I got to touch on this. You just talked about this idea, like, why isn't it profitable? Or, why are we doing this if it isn't profitable? And you said there's better reasons than profit sometimes. And I wonder if you can just kind of go a little level deeper on that and that decision-making process.
I'll give you a simple example that anyone can understand. But in hotels, there's a thing called occupancy rates. And it's a number everyone knows. Oh, what are you 85% full? Are you 100% full? Are you 50% full? And my mother used to always tell me she liked being full or empty. She didn't like having like 5 people here. And I never understood that. And I would always say, but you don't have to be dealing with them. You could have your staff deal with them. And 5 people is enough to maybe cover the cost of electricity and cover the, why wouldn't you want to at least cover those fixed costs? And she's like, I just don't want to have anyone here. I want to work in the gardens and I want to build and create. And I understood that. So we let her do that. And that's why she built such an amazing place. But as soon as I came aboard, I said, okay, well, we're going to increase occupancy rates and we're going to have more groups and we're going to have more individuals. And what I realized, something very obvious, is that if you have too many people here, your staff burn out and you burn out. Yeah. And there's nothing worse than having people see you and see that you're exhausted of talking to them. And I don't want to be at the point where I'm not excited to have a group here. And I've been doing this 7 years full time. And there are times when I need to go take a break. But generally, I'm really excited for every group that comes. And I have to do a lot of work to make sure that I'm excited and my staff is excited. So I think everyone in business understands burnout. But when you're at MBA, you're thinking, oh, get your occupancy rate up to 85%. And I'm like, no, get it down to 65% so that we can have rest time and that we're excited to come to work tomorrow. So my number one priority, I have 22 staff who've been with me for over 20 years. I want them to stay another 20 years, at least another 10 or 15. So how do I do that? How do I keep them healthy and inspired every day? And so those are concepts that a Western business person can grasp because they're very relevant to business. But then there are other concepts like, do I want to run a program that's not going to make money because it's going to reach people that need it more? I'm doing a lot of yoga retreats and I'm preaching to the choir because yoga people are really interested in this stuff. They care about vegetarian food. They care about nature, generally speaking. They care about learning about cultures. But if I'm working on a trip to try to get executives or business people, they're going to be a lot more work. And but I think they're the ones that need the program more. So I'm going to make more of an effort to reach them, even though in theory, yes, I could charge more money, but actually it's going to be a lot more work for me than doing what I'm already good at. And a business lesson would say, focus on what you're good at, make money on that. Why would you go and diversify and do something different? And that's been a challenge that I've been struggling with.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure that the listeners caught that, because y'all are a wellness center whose people are practicing what they preach. And that's huge. I think
not
important.
always easy. I mean, my blood pressure went up this year and I had to go see a doctor and I had to take medication. And that was a huge blow to my ego, because I thought, I'm doing all this. My doctor says to me, I know your life. I've been to Willka T'ika. You eat well, you do yoga, you maintain your stress. You have high blood pressure because you live at altitude. You live at 9,000 feet. Your mother has high blood pressure. Your sister has it. You need to take medication. And I said, no, I'm going to take herbal supplements and I'm going to do this. And I tried it for 2 months and it didn't work. And now I'm taking medication and I'm like, you know what? I've got to walk both worlds. I've got to listen to the doctors and I've got to listen to the healers, and they both have their wisdom. And so now I'm on medication. I feel much better.
That's amazing. I mean, what an incredible example of like being a bridge between like modern and the traditional. It's awesome. Do you see yourself as a bridge?
I do, because I don't see myself as a shaman and I don't see myself as like a business coach. I see myself as something in between. And that's partly what I'm trying to figure out, is how do I bring these people together and help them communicate with each other.
Yeah, I love it. Mm-hmm. So let's come back to Willka T'ika. Can you talk to me about what happens on a typical 7-day wellness retreat?
Yeah, so we have a framework which works with our 7 chakras, our 7 energy centers, our 7 gardens, where every day we do a different mindfulness activity, a different nature connection activity, a different Andean ceremony, and a different therapeutic treatment. And so the first one is probably the easiest to understand. We have a yoga or meditation class every day. People love that. They wake up, they can do yoga, they can do aggressive yoga, they can do a restorative yoga. They can do meditation, they can sit in the gardens, they can connect with, their higher self. And I think most people these days appreciate and understand the need for mindfulness, especially even in the corporate world. People are talking about this all the time. So that one we've been doing for 30 years, but that's something I think now people are more ready for and more open to. The second thing is a nature connection activity. And we've talked about that already, but I think people really want to be in nature. And our garden guest house, as you call it, is set up around nature. So you could stay here the whole week and feel very connected to nature, to the animals, to the birds, to the hummingbirds, the butterflies. But because we live in the Andes, I like to take people on hikes. And there's 2 or 3 hikes we take people on. One to these Incan ruins, one to these salt mines, another one around the local neighborhood to see where the people live. So those are examples of nature connection activities. You can go off to Rainbow Mountain like you're doing. You need an extra couple days to do that. You need to be activated. But there's an endless amount of amazing mountains you can go visit. The third one is probably the most important one. That's the Andean ceremonies. And we talked about the cocoa leaf blessing and the pago a la tierra, or the offering to Pachamama. Those are just examples. There are several others. We work with different plants. We work with cacao. We work with sound healing. We have an amazing sound healer who comes and plays instruments and does sound healing. We do cocoa leaf readings, so you can have your future told by a woman who reads a cocoa leaf. It sounds crazy, but people love her, and she's coming tomorrow because both groups from Texas, by the way, these are yoga groups from Texas, have both said, we want the cocoa leaf reader. They have no idea what they're getting into, but they all want to try it. So that's another example. We do a sweat lodge, which isn't typically a Peruvian tradition, but it's become very popular here. So we'll do a sweat lodge ceremony. And these are all very powerful ceremonies that allow people to kind of really go deep and connect with what's going on inside them, what their higher wisdom is telling them. And we guide them through that process. And the last thing is the simplest. That's a spot. Therapeutic treatments could be our flower baths, our massages. We have a crystal bed treatment. We have a bunch of different treatments which work really well with the wellness theme and the food that we serve and everything else that we do. So that would be a 7-day program that we offer, and then we do those every other month.
Sounds amazing. Sign me up. That's so cool. So who are your typical clients?
Well, I mentioned our yoga groups, and that has been sort of our mainstay for many years, but we are trying to broaden and reach different special interest groups. So it could be a hiking group, it could be a bird watching group, it could be a writing group. We get a lot of women's groups, and we're trying to get more and more business leader groups. So my wife and I we met actually after Stanford Business School. So we have a lot of executives that are now, late in their careers, starting to wonder about what they're doing and what they should be doing and what their legacy is. So we're trying to attract those folks, and they've been coming more and more over the years to come and experience wellness in a different way, both for their own benefit and for the benefit of their communities and the people that work for them, because these are people who have a lot of influence. We want them to experience all the wisdom that we have here.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'm curious, like when people come there, like, do you find that they're searching for something or seeking something?
Very, very often. I think most people are processing, to use one word. They're searching. They may even be grieving. They're going through something and they're looking for something. They may not even know what that is, but there's something calling them to Peru. And it may just be they want to see Machu Picchu, but those people tend to go to the more touristy hotels. The ones that come to Willka T'ika are coming for a reason. They're drawn by the staff, the culture, the people, the food. There's something about Willka T'ika that's special, and they don't fully know until they get here and see the gardens and meet the people and eat the food. And then what tends to happen is they start searching, and they want to do ceremonies, and they want to meet with the healers, and they want to get spa treatments, and they want to talk to us. And then that's when the deeper work starts to happen. And then we get people coming back multiple times. And that always amazes me, because I feel like people that check things off their bucket list move on to the next thing. But Peru's different. Peru, people come back multiple times. Most of our groups are return groups. About half of the groups that come here have been here before. And some of them have been here many times. We have one woman who's come 14 times with groups.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's a powerful place, and people are definitely finding healing here.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, because you did mention this earlier, people often associate plant medicine with trips to Peru. And I just specifically for people that might not be familiar with what that is, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and whether that's something that is associated with Willka T'ika.
Yeah, it's a question we get asked a lot, probably weekly. And I'll tell you a quick funny anecdote. I went back to the Bay Area I was visiting my house in Berkeley, and I wanted to fix my laptop. So I went to the Mac store and I asked him if he could fix it. And he said, sure, I'll have it ready next week. And I said, actually, I need to leave the country on Friday. Can you get it done by Friday? I've got to go back to Peru. And he said, you live in Peru? And I said, yeah. He's like, do you do ayahuasca? I'm a tech guy who literally wouldn't look at me in the face and had nothing to say to me until I said Peru. And then his eyes lit up and he said, you do ayahuasca? And he wanted to ask 100 questions. And I get this almost weekly. When I go home, I get a lot more. And so what I've learned is, instead of resisting it, I've tried to embrace it, and I've tried to help inform people, because there's a lot of excitement around plant medicine and often a lot of misinformation. And so what we've done is we've written up a handbook for people who want to know about this. And we've told them that we have a tremendous respect for plant medicine. And when I say plant medicine, I'm generally talking about ayahuasca and San Pedro or Huachuma. And these are two hallucinogenic plants that are legal in Peru. And so originally in the 80s, when my mother came here, you had to come to Peru to try these things because you couldn't try them anywhere else. And so there were a lot of people saying, go to Peru and try ayahuasca. One of them is a very famous ethnobotanist named Terrence McKenna, who passed away in 2000. And his brother, Dennis McKenna, is a friend of ours who comes to Peru every year and stays with us and has a podcast all about plant medicine. So you can listen to his podcast. It's called The Rainforest Cafe. And every week they talk about psychedelics. And so there are a lot of these podcasts out there. There are a lot of people talking about plant medicine that are much more knowledgeable than I am. But because we live in the center of this and we've been doing this for so long, people are always asking us. And so what we tell them in a nutshell is, A, we have a whole handbook you can read on our website. And B, we are focused, again, on Quechua cosmology and all this amazing wisdom that's from the Andes. Ayahuasca is from the jungle. And so if you want to really learn about ayahuasca, you should probably go to the jungle. There are other plants that grow here that we might use, but we only use them in very special circumstances with retreats that we've managed. We don't have express shamanism where you can stop in and do a ceremony. And there's a lot of places in Cusco or in the Sacred Valley where they offer that. And I think that's very dangerous and very, in some ways, disrespectful to just kind of fly in and try to squeeze a ceremony before your next flight. It's irresponsible at best, and it could potentially be dangerous. So what we try to encourage people is do your research, read a lot, learn a lot, and then use your own intuition. And getting to kind of the Western and the Eastern way, read a lot and learn about these plants because there's a lot to learn. Make sure that they're not going to interact with any medication that you're on, which is a common problem. And then also really use your intuition and figure out, where do you want to try this experience? Where do you want to do it? What is the set and the setting? What is the energy of the place that you're doing this? What is the reason that you're doing this? And feel into that, and you will find the right place. You don't have to rush just because you're in Peru and try to squeeze it into your free day. In fact, I recommend not doing that. And we will help people do that, but we will help inform them. And if they stay here long enough, we will introduce them to our shaman, who is our plant medicine shaman, who lives next door, and they could talk to him and work with him. Now, his retreats are 7 to 9 days long. He's also not going to do very often a one-day ceremony. And so, there's a lot to be said about this, and we try to point people in the right direction. But what we basically say is we have so much to teach about the Andes that we want to focus on that, and that plant medicine is a topic that would take a lot of time, and it's not something we want to dabble with lightly.
I love that. That was such a great explanation, and I love that you guys wrote a handbook for this, because obviously it's something that comes up a lot. Yeah, one of my experience, and because I do intend to come to Peru within the next year, and one of my experiences has been that just seems like there's so many different ways to do Peru, right? I mean, there's the hiking, and there's the adventure side, and there's trekking, and then there's wellness, and then this plant medicine piece that we're talking about right now. But it just seems like there's sort of a lot of different ways that you can kind of approach a trip to Peru.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think it's important for people to understand this is a place you can come to many times. I mean, like you, I would go for a week trekking trip. I would go for a week of a wellness experience. Yeah. I would go for a week of plant medicine, but I wouldn't try to do all three of those in 1 week.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. So I'm curious, Willka T'ika, you've been at this now full time. I think you said 7 years.
Yeah, full time 7 years, and I've been involved for 30 years since the very beginning.
Yeah, I mean, any transformations that you've witnessed that you could share with us?
Ooh, certainly everybody says they've been transformed. Not everybody, but a lot of people say they've been transformed. And then we always encourage them to go home and really take time to integrate their experience, because you get a lot of insights when you come here. You get a lot of ideas, a lot of inspiration. But the integration process, and actually you and I talked about the hero's journey. So maybe now is a good time to mention that. The hero's journey has 3 phases. And Peru is a perfect place to come and do the hero's journey, because the first phase is separation, and you're leaving your comfort zone, you're leaving your world, your job, your family, you're coming here. And often it can be challenging. There's an altitude element, there's different diet, there's different climate. People feel uneasy the first few days. So that's a classic hero's journey separation. Then you go through the threshold. And for us, the threshold can be many things. It can be doing a hike to Rainbow Mountain, where you're going to get violently sick when you get to 17,000 feet. Not to scare you, but I always tell people Rainbow Mountain is like going to Everest Base Camp. You could do that kind of thing, and you're not used to it. You're going to feel it. So that's a pretty intense threshold. Doing a plant medicine experience would be another intense threshold. You're going to feel things you've never felt before. Even doing one of our ceremonies, even though they're very safe and quite mild, like a sweat lodge, can be very powerful. A sound healing ceremony, a yoga class can be very powerful. So you're putting yourself out of your comfort zone, and you're pushing yourself. And that's what the threshold experience is. And so that's where people feel they're having transformation. In fact, on our 7-day retreat, our day 6, we call Transformation Day. That doesn't mean that you're changed. You're not done. That's the beginning of the journey. And so at that point, you have to go into the integration phase, which is the 3rd phase. And that's usually not enough time is going to happen in Peru where you can do that. You need to go do it at home. And that's where people get stuck, because they go back to Peru and they have to integrate what they've learned. And that can take months. And that might need a therapist. They might need a support group. They might need to come back to Peru. We had a woman who was here in our wellness trip in March, a wonderful woman from Europe. And she'd gone through a lot of grief. She'd lost a friend. She was deeply sad and depressed. She didn't know why. She assumed it had to do with the death of her friend, but there were other things going on, and she wasn't quite sure. She came here and did all the ceremonies, did the whole program, and felt completely transformed. But of course, we told her, this doesn't mean that your journey's over. You're going to have a lot of work to do when you get home. And I hope you have support. And I know that we're here for you. And she just wrote to me a couple of weeks ago to say she's still really struggling, and she wants to come back to Peru, and the mountains are calling her. And of course, we want her to come back, but we also want her to heal, and we want her to find a place in her home where she can heal. And that's the challenge. People will go home, and that's why, and not to get too sidetracked on the ayahuasca conversation, but that's another reason why I encourage people to be careful, is that a lot of people who've had that experience, they want to go back to that experience because they felt a certain peace that they haven't felt. And so they think the answer is to keep going back and doing ayahuasca. And that might help some people, but the answer is to do the work, and the work is hard. That's why it's called work. And so you might go do ayahuasca and feel that you're completely transformed, but if you don't do all the other things in your life that you need to do, you're going to have that craving like you have with any addiction, where you need to go back and do more and more and more. And so it's really important to have that 3rd phase. And to be honest, that is an area where I think we all fall short, because we see people transform, but then they go home and we don't know what happens to all of them. We try to stay in touch. But like I said, many of them come back, and we hope that they come back in a more positive time each time.
I love it. Terry, it's not often that I get to just sit on a Zoom call or, in front of my computer and just digest the wisdom of the Andes. It's pretty awesome. Is there anything else that you want to share with listeners? Like any thoughts maybe for somebody that's considering a visit to Peru or the Sacred Valley?
I think you said it best. There are many experiences to have in Peru, and, Willka T'ika is one of them. So I think it's great to go to Peru and trek. I think it's great to go to Peru and do an archaeology tour. It's great to go to Peru and do a culinary tour. If you want to do a wellness tour, then we are available, and we're wilkatika.com. You can email me directly if you want. I'm happy to talk to people. If you want to do a plant medicine journey, we can point you the right direction, but we might not be the right place for you. A lot of people come here before their plant medicine journey or after, but we don't encourage that here at the site because it could distract the others. So there are many different ways to experience Peru. I hope you will experience them all. I love all of them as well. I'm excited that you're going to come trekking here, Scott. So I hope we get to hear about your trek and meet up when you're here. And the mountains of Peru are, to me, one of the most special things in the world. And I hope you all get a chance to experience them.
I love it. Thank you. So wilkatika.com.
Wilkatika.com. Yeah. WILLKATIKA. And you can email me too if you want, Terry at Willka T'ika.
Amazing. Thank you. That's awesome. So Terry, there's a question that I ask everybody at the end of every episode, especially for you growing up in the Bay Area, going through this transformational experience of moving to Peru and getting to lead an amazing place like Willka T'ika. Like, wow, at some point, Hollywood's going to pick up on your story and they're going to want to make a movie about you and your life. And I'm curious, when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie?
Well, I have a funny answer to that. And that is, in the pandemic, we had a lot of free time. There were no one coming to Peru. And so I wrote a book that I haven't published yet. It's called Special Guests, Wacky and Wild Wellness Stories in Peru's Sacred Valley. And I thought it was kind of clever. It was about all these interesting people that come here, a lot of them doing plant medicine, a lot of them doing other things. And we went back to Australia for Christmas, and my wife and I are watching this Australian author who wrote a book called 9 Perfect Strangers. Turns out Nicole Kidman did an HBO miniseries on it. And it really tells the story of a wellness center with 9 strangers who come and have these crazy experiences. Now, of course, It's Hollywood. So they took it to the nth degree, and there was sex and drugs and violence and all this crazy stuff. But it's really just an enhanced version of what we do here. And so we were kind of like, oh, bummer. Hollywood's already done it. And they got Nicole Kidman. And I don't know how successful it was, but I actually think it was pretty accurate in terms of the types of people that come here and the types of people that can run these wellness centers, especially the plant medicine side. So I think the movie's been done, but I'm happy to do another version. And I would have to say be a younger version of Tom Hanks to play me, because
I love it.
When I was in my 20s, I was jogging in Mexico City and jogging in Chapultepec Park. And some guys drove by in a car and they looked at me and they said, "Hello, Forrest Gump." So
I love it.
I looked like Forrest Gump at one point in my life. So you can find a young Tom Hanks to play me.
Yeah, that's amazing. How fun. What's your movie going to be called?
Special Guests.
Nice. Special Guests starring Tom Hanks. That sounds like an Oscar winner. I think that's going to be a hit.
I'll tell you, if it just gets to HBO, I'll be happy.
Terry, this is so much fun. I really enjoyed talking with you today. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. For those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Terry's stories encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. Terry, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Scott. I had a blast.